to take a perspective trip, right? So, like, why is this collaboration happening, and what Ace is seeing in this bigger picture, and what you're trying to do. So, for that, I want to take you outside of beyond this context of what is actually there. So, if you just take this expo, right? So, there are so many different companies that are there, close to probably 100 different organizations that are come here. It must be around $100 billion of, market capitalization. That's a whole ecosystem that is present here, right? This is all Automation Expo, and what is that one thing that they're trying to do from a utility point of view? Positioning. Positioning what? The components that we consume on a day-to-day basis. And why does the position matter? To be able to extract that utility out of the raw material. Shape gives that, right? All that they are trying to do is, hey, I have a sensor to say where is that object. I have a sensor to say whether the object is presented in the right way. Right. So that that kind of shape could be taken out of that particular material, raw material that you're actually feeding. And who is going to take the shape out? Who is going to hold the object? That's exactly what this whole expo is about, right? What if, outrageously, that we think that all this variety of companies could be just merged into one kind of technology solution? The way we imagine that, this is what you're trying to build, this collaboration is trying to build is object computers. That'll be like, it doesn't make sense. What is computer? What is object computer? But you don't fall very far from a data processing from that perspective, right? So if you just look at the way, that's what CynLr imagines. It's a CynLr's envisioning that we want to build object computers of future. And if you want to analogically look at how data processing used to happen, right? You had variety of different machines, devices, you had typewriters, fax machines, FM radios, TVs, telephones, and so many things that used to be there to ensure that we can process information, extract the information in an utilizable manner from a raw data. How are they doing it? How did they actually generalize that? They just noticed that every such activity is either addition or reduction that you're doing, and it's just flowing between those processes. That's logic. We call it as ALU. Once that happened, then the transformation of computers evolved, and today we have that in our phone. We are shooting this video, we are publishing this video through these things, we are communicating with each other. Possibilities are numerous, but that unification of process, universalization of the process, could we actually imagine a factory universalized that way? Look at the numbers, right? Look at the variety of these things. Your PCB inside your PC also has these many components, except that has been condensed in one. And there is an ALU logic for generalizing data processing. Is there a similar logic for objects? Typically, what are you doing? You had a raw material like steel. This is also aluminum, that is also aluminum, right? That portion, the camera is also aluminum. Each of them have completely different utility. When the shape changes, they have a completely different utility. Now, the only thing that I did is, by removing material or adding material, which is arithmetic process, by which you extracted the shape out. Now, that's exactly what Ace's expertise is. They build machines, they do this. In fact, they are also doing this 3D metal printing that they have successfully done, and they are planning to probably, I'm envisioning the future where you will have one condensed setup where you will also do the addition, which is your 3D printing. You'll also have a reduction that's coming. So this is addition, multiplication, subtraction, all happening one machine. Then why is factory? And Ace sells close to 7,000 machines in a year? That's what I'm told, right? At least around that number, right? So which means there is so much of customers who are actually, these machines are standardized, and so many of them are actually buying this. Then why are factories different between two different parts? If these machines are the ones that is across all those factories, that's going every year, mind it, every year. It's not just one time, 7,000 machines being deployed every year. Then why are factories different? Simply because your logical flow, which is your conveying systems, are different. What is the 3D conveying system? Except it's not dynamic enough like a human being. The other alternative that you have for logic today is human beings who pick and place those parts, orient those parts, position those parts, right? This is only positioning. The moment orienting comes is when everything falls apart, right? That's the place where we are fixing. I think this combination can bring that ALU equivalent for factories, and that might transform this into where we are trying to achieve the bigger vision, the grander vision of universal factories, which will translate them into an object computer world. So imagine we are talking about this $100 billion worth of haul that are actually looking at here. But I think when that gets merged together, this might be, I don't know, maybe $1 trillion. This actually makes this as a minuscule number when that transformation actually happens, right? That it becomes a sub-ecosystem. That's where I see this collaboration and our presence in this expo being immensely useful understanding the ecosystem and penetrating the ecosystem. So it's interesting. So unlike a software industry or established standardized industry like software, contrary to the popular belief, manufacturing is yet to see that transformation and then see that expansion of it. It had its own explosion at one point of time, right? When the assembly lines were generalized, pipelining structure was Ford's transformation of assembly lines and things. But since then, it has focused too much on the process, right? The biggest barrier that I have is the process in itself, right? It feels counterintuitive because that's what allows you to scale, except when we subscribe to it too much, right? You're replicating that scale. You're not scaling the scale. You're not expanding to a larger market. You're trying to expand and then cover the existing market. It limits you to that. Untethering that manufacturing and then making the manufacturer see manufacturing beyond as an ability or an enabler, but as a grower of the market. As the, let's say, instead of a TVS going and selling their bikes, what if their bikes sell because of the way they manufacture, right? And the manufacturing allows them to customize your bikes, right? Today you just want to go and then say that, hey, I want to change all these factors about the bike, I want to change the tires, I want to change those things, customize for my benefit and use cases. Is that feasible? Is there a personalized commodity that you can actually get from any of this manufacturing today? So that thinking and then getting out of that boxed fear of not sticking to the process, resulting in something that will or breaking those processes is the biggest barrier that I actually see, because that limits you from adopting and exploring technology. You want known and proven tech, right, of something that has been used in the past. That delays the adoption of tech, that delays the adoption of experimentation, that delays a lot of other factors, and then trying to penetrate and then mate with the existing ecosystem tightly, which is necessary. I'm not saying it should not be done, but the level to which the intensity has to be mellowed down a little bit, and then can also notice that the rest of the ecosystem can also evolve to adapt around you. So that active forthcoming attitude in the manufacturing is a big barrier for us to cross. What does it actually mean, right? From a principle point of view, this is there, but from a utility point of view, right? So today, a robotic arm, right, so that you actually see here, this machine can do a 20 micron precision. This is a story from one of the customers, right? So every time when customers come and ask, they look at robots as a drop-in replacement for manual labor, right? That's the only way I imagine automation. I'm looking at it as not as an augmentation, right? That's the one nice statistics when we were studying the market, right, that we came up with. I'm losing the numbers exactly, but somewhere around that, right? So China is 3x, this was around 2016-17, China was 3x costlier in manual labor compared to what India was. I think Japan was almost 10x or 12x costlier than India was, right? But if you, which also makes sense, that the wages are being paid so low, but on the other hand, manufacturing is pretty much standardized across the globe. Even Indian manufacturing is predominantly foreign setups being put there, so processes are actually borrowed from there. So, which means India should be a much cheaper place for you to produce, and we should have become a manufacturing phenomenon as much as software phenomenon that we are. Yet that didn't happen. In spite of being 10x cheaper than Japan and 3x cheaper than China. So something is not happening, right? Yeah. Productivity. Japan is 40x more productive than for the one person. If you see per capita GDP of manufacturing alone, the same factory with the same number of people, how much it's able to produce in Japan versus in India. Simplest, how is that feasible, right? Are human beings lazy here? No. You are enabling them less because of lack of infrastructure. If I have a power screwdriver versus a normal screwdriver, how many screws would you be able to tighten within an hour? That's a huge change. Yeah. I'm just saying that one tool. That thinking is yet to percolate even within manufacturing in a larger setup. Cost is being the only driver. That's the only way by which the organization is identifying the use case for automation, right? And automation, the word automation is also over abused. We don't produce systems that are intelligent as a drop-in replacement for a human being. A computer today is not a drop-in replacement for a human being, right? It just enhances the ability for you to use it for a much larger use cases, more versatile applications and things, right? That's exactly how you should also imagine robots. Robots are not a replacement for a labor, right? If a person was handling one station all through the day, what if the same person can handle a whole line? Because you have robots, right? Look at that level of scaling. That understanding is something somewhere we also have to struggle. We are struggling to articulate and then bring it out because it's not a common narrative, and we have to make it as a common narrative, right? And that knowledge barrier or that imagination barrier is the biggest problem that we have to cross. Otherwise, cost, So there are two ways I can approach. Okay, there is a cost because that's what it costs to build the tech.
Right.
But can I also derive more value out of it? Right? Is it utilizable? The unit cost, is it utilizable? Those structuring is something that we can evolve very, very, with Ace being with us, that can also evolve in a much more faster way. We are, and the industry, the other problem with the industry is being, from an industry side, right, automation industry side, it's always reactive. It's not proactive, right? We don't go about understanding the customer's problem from a holistic perspective. We always reduce it to just an engineering problem. We don't expand this to a business problem. And then understand from a business perspective, right? And then see for a whole transformation of the business. That is also a lack from this side. How can I transform or educate the value or build the value for the whole line?
Right.
So there is the biggest break that we actually have is from the tech side, right? And for us to understand, and so the technology understanding is very different from what customer wants. I'm segregating these two, right? Often when I say reactive, in the previous point I was again talking about, we are being reactive, we are not being proactive, we are not going ahead and then trying to prove something that the customers have never seen before, right? And we always start asking questions saying that customers never ask that why are we building it. That thought barrier, it's the first thing to break, right, for us to come into. The biggest thing that we have noticed and then we have built around to come about is the independence of the system from the lighting constraints. That's the biggest technology transformation, right, that we have actually have gotten, right? That untethers and relieves us from a lot of structuring that happens around, right? That minimizes the cost for the customer, from the effort, from the cost of having to reinvent your whole engineering or your manufacturing line every time when the shape changes.
Right.
How do I make it agnostic of those variations, right? How do I make it completely generic? For that took us more than 10 years, right? It's one thing to have technology, the other thing is for the customer to have solution. The customer needs a solution. What I have is technology. This is what we are looking for future, bridging the gap in between through a platform, through a product. What customer wants is something that he can readily utilize. Product is my internal problem, right? What customer needs is a solution to his problem, right? But in our personal interest, we want to transform this technology into a product format, right? And that's where we also see our collaboration with Ace evolving further, that we could productize this in a holistic way, that it is self-reliant, right? If I'm just selling only this system, then customer has to go and figure out the other side, and then matching and mating. There is a system integration then again comes into play.
Right.
That again, the success of your tech depends on that integration as a problem. So how do we eliminate all this? So that's where even this understanding that, hey, you need to have to do partnership with somebody to bring the you are not the holistic solution. Only if you're giving the holistic solution, then the adoption even becomes much more easier, becomes less painful for the customer. It's not always the cost that's a barrier. Your actual cost is till my system fails in the factory, right? Not when I have deployed and then put them because the service, support, the repairs, right? The amount of time that they are not able to utilize the infrastructure that they invested upon. These are the major things that we learned over this 10 years. The insight that, hey, I could build a vision system which need not depend on this lighting, right? In this environment, you look at the kind of lighting that is there. Every other demo that you would actually see in this stall will have a specialized lighting, an IR projection. It has no lighting, literally, right? And yet without any kind of learning, any kind of, predetermined training, the system is able to adapt to it. Of course, it's clumsy like a baby, but if this capability is inherently there, if I'm putting it on traditional engineering where you system integrate, how much more of capability that you can bring about. So this is what this 10 years actually taught, but at the same time, this is where we also think the collaboration will take us further from being a technology company, that we could cross the chasm and then take it as a solution to the customers, right? And Ace would help us in productizing and then taking that platform, where we see that Ace needs us to complete the line and we need them to complete the line for the customer. I'm just seeing where I can actually begin from, right? So hiring is not a simple, so it's not a HR problem, hey, I need more bodies to just replicate those things, right? So that's not how we can approach, and I don't think even if you try to do it, any company wouldn't be able to just solve the problem thinking that I need people to just, it's not a blue collar problem, right? It's a intense research problem, and in a domain that is not that attractive, right? Today, the level with which software attracts in India, at least as a geography problem, right? And even globally, the way hardware has lacked its luster to its hard problem, right? in the same limited amount of time, we are competing from a resource point of view, we are from a brain, intellectual capital point of view, we are competing again with every other tech, even fintech for the case, right? From where we need to get the minds to think about this whole problem and make them think about this. My biggest problem is that it's another barrier. Just like we were talking about customers, the perspective barrier for them to see how much value is hidden inside the amount of gold in this continent of hardware that you are supposed to. Bigger picture painting in their mind is a huge problem, and it's always a needle in the haystack. For me, or internally, the way we also think, CynLr actually thinks, we can't separate technology from people, right? This machine is not where the tech actually lies. It's the mind that imagined this. It's the minds that actually put them together, how technology actually comes out. And I need to have that right minds, and they'll be able to imagine it only if they know the right side of the problems, that they are able to look at the problem from the same, onto the same problem. They will have their own. No person can ever have, I don't believe in this fact that, hey, you need to have a mix of different minds. If two bulls in a cart is pulling in two different directions, the cart will never move forward. It will only topple. You need to have the same aim, and never two people have the same perspective any which way. They'll always see two different perspectives, right? So everybody carries their own perspective, except finding the people who connect to these problems, right? Finding the people who are willing to connect to these problems is the bigger issue, and I think they would do it, except you are buried and distracted by all the other problems. There are enough problems in the other domains and other places also that this industry has to project and propose this. Somewhere we are trying to solve that problem. On the other hand, this also brings another interesting phenomenon, right? Every organization exists because they are trying to give value. They are building value. You have Ola kind of organization, Ola, WeWorks kind of organizations. You also have Intel, ARM kind of organizations. You also have TVS and these kind of, and Sansera kind of manufacturing organizations. There are facilitators, there are application builders, there are technology builders, right? There are platform, technology and application. Right. Often application is built on existing technology, and which also means that they have enough capital, human capital, for them to, or skill set capital for them to readily start building their applications. The only thing that we need to do in this case is people who are aligning to your vision and that you can actually bring. Here aligning is not just enough. If you're inventing technology, which means it never existed, which means nobody's trained to be able to build this. You need to go into a discovery journey, and it's unpredictable. Finding those minds which have that intensity to go behind this, unlearn everything that they have ever done, right? This tech is what I have is an unsolved problem, right? There are two kinds of problems organizations actually solve. One is unexplored and the other is unsolved. A space is an unexplored problem. Space tech is an unexplored problem because nobody had the means to go and explore it yet. What I have here is an unsolved problem. People had been attempting for 40 years. Yet if it is, deceiving you, then the problem is highly illusionary. Right? It tricks you very quickly into thinking that you have a solution, but by the time you burn your cash, you burn your effort, the capital for experimentation is all done, and people lose this interest in it and then move on. A decade if you are spending in trying to solve this problem, it's not solved. People would want to move further into it, which means there has to be a certain level of intensity to notice, see beyond the trickery that it actually shows, and see the problem. And the problem is not just about this technology and engineering capability. It's more about the whole business structure, the ecosystem. It's only 10% that happens here. The remaining 90% is the whole ecosystem. How do you make them also see this problem, right? So this many folds of HR problem and hiring problem, right? Talent building problem, right? And some talent you have to build in-house, so any which way. Some we want people to come in and then give us that expertise, but convince them that from an alternate world you might have to, this is also as, like for example, I want to hire gamers. Right. The intensity of C++ development that actually happens, only gamers would be able to, game engine developers in fact, not gamers, sorry, game engine developers will be able to do that. We don't have that population in India. If at all there is there sporadically someone as an hobbyist who is building it, but that hobbyist is interested towards building a game, he would never imagine that his skill is utilizable in a robotic arm, automation and robotic arm problem. The intensity with which so I have more than 1 GB of data being produced every second, right? That's 5 MP, right? And the only other place where you have at 60 FPS, right? The only other place where dynamic physics changing every time, processing, telling a real world in a game, when you fail, you can respawn to the same. When a robot actually goes and jams apart or breaks It can even result in human fatality. You can't do a Control Z and then you can get the person back. Right?
Absolutely.
It's even more serious. It's a game that you are playing in real world.
Yeah.
Right? And imagine how much of intense processing that you'll have to do in those cases. Right? How much of real time that you need to do. The only other industry that has come closer to that kind of level of, denser programming and development is game engine developers. Incidentally, I also hear the SpaceX is another organization which keeps hiring game developers, because any small error of precision up there, you can't go on billions of dollars just gone, or millions or hundreds of millions of dollars gone, and lives being wasted there. So these are very unique problems from a hiring perspective that we actually have, right? Neither can I actually, if I have to go and hire and groom them, I don't have the muscle. As a small organization, we are already, we have, everybody thinks this common thought, right? That big organizations have bigger problems. Big organizations have larger volume of problems. We also have the same big problems, same variety of problems. The variety doesn't change between a small or a big organization.
Right.
Only the amount of that task actually changes, which means every individual is grappling between multiple different problems, more versatile, right? With all this happening, it's impossible for you to sit and groom everybody. They need to be able to learn by themselves in these cases. So in certain cases, we want, if the industry already has the know-how, I don't want to go reinventing them. But yet, how do we divert them into focusing on this problem and make that seriously? That's another big challenge that we typically have. And sometimes it's also over-abused, like your ML, AI, and when artificial intelligence is not definable, then it's not empirical. It's not empirical, it's not scientific. If it's not scientific, it's not engineerable. When I have a difference of definition for what artificial is, what intelligence is between you and me, then how is it? Yeah. But yet people have already got carried away. Everybody thinks from this is, I'm also making this a point so that whoever it reaches, whatever it reaches. In our ethos, we don't believe that, it's already a well-established tech. All I have to do is adopt those APIs, just, tinker with them and start building those things. We don't borrow any of the libraries, right? We don't use OpenCV, we don't use Caffe or TensorFlow or any of those things. We build everything from scratch. We relook this from the fundamentals and basics, right? That's how we could actually get this solved in a which way, right? And someone who even agrees to this, because everybody comes, oh, if Google has done it, how do you think you could challenge that? So that attitude difference and that perspective, again, that's a major. There might be amazing minds, but who are much more capable than us probably in solving it. But if you don't have the attitude set, alignment is missed. If alignment is missed, they are building something else and we are building something else. The problem and the solution don't match, right? Again, getting that from the talent pool is another challenge.